Hey guys, tonight we slip silently into a time when beauty meant pain, literal, bone-crushing pain, and fashion was less about flair and more about obedience. Picture this. It's late evening in a cold courtyard in Qing, China. Lanterns sway like tired eyelids. And you, a little girl, are told to sit down and hold very, very still. Your toes? They're about to vanish, not metaphorically, but in the very real sense of being folded under and bound tightly until they break. You probably won't survive this, style-wise or otherwise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to know who's listening in the dark with us. Now, sink into your pillow, because things are about to get delicately disturbing. You trudge through a narrow alley paved with smooth stones slick from the mist. The air smells like steamed rice and smoke, and you hear the shuffle of feet, some fast, some slow, some strangely tip-tapping, like the quiet patter of fingers on silk. You follow the sound until you see them. Women walking on impossibly tiny shoes. Each step a ceremony, each motion a painful ballet. Their feet barely lift from the ground, knees bent, hips swaying more than necessary. It's not elegance, it's compensation. Their bones have been bent into obedience. You might think, okay, but why? Because in Qing, China, from about 1644 to 1912, footbinding wasn't a fad, it was the fabric of femininity. It said you were refined, desirable, and, more grimly, under control. Small feet weren't just beautiful, they were moral. To be unbound was to be unruly. But it didn't start with the Qing. No, footbinding had already been around for centuries, likely beginning in the Song dynasty, around the 10th century, when a dancer with bound feet supposedly captivated the emperor with her graceful pirouettes on a golden lotus pedestal. Whether that tale is true, historians still argue whether the golden lotus dancer actually existed or was a story crafted to justify centuries of suffering. By the Qing era, though, the custom was in full swing, full limp. Binding began early, usually between ages 5 and 7. Why so young? Because the bones were soft, pliable, eager to betray you. And once you started, there was no going back. The goal was a 3-inch foot, the so-called golden lotus. Think about that, 3 inches. That's shorter than most smartphones. Your own foot likely spans twice that. Now, imagine forcing it to fold inward, breaking the arch, tucking the toes beneath the sole like origami made of cartilage and scream. And yet, in this world, this was normal. You look around and see rows of mothers preparing cloth strips for the next round of binding, heating tiny shoes by the fire, smiling with pride as their daughters whimper into sleeves. Not because they're cruel, but because they care. In their world, this is what love looks like, prepared suffering for a better marriage. The first time you hear someone mention lotus feet, you assume it's a metaphor. Then you see the shoes, little embroidered wonders shaped like crescent moons. Barely big enough for a doll. They are exquisite, intricately beaded, often made of satin, sometimes dyed red with crushed insects, a fashionable secret you'd rather not remember next time you swat a bug. Each pair is a personal poem. Some women even stitched secret messages into the inner lining, hidden love notes, cries for help, or sarcastic jokes for whoever might one day read them. Yes, really. One unearthed shoe reportedly read, "May my husband's next wife have bunions." But there's no laughter when you watch the walking. You can't unsee the staggered gait, the constant need for support, the grimace behind the painted fan. You realize that in this society, the very act of walking has been aestheticized. Women were taught to walk in small, fluttering steps not just to appear delicate, but because anything more would rip open healing wounds. There's no grand parade for these women. Their pain is invisible, their struggle stitched into brocade. You pass a school, but it's for boys. Girls stay home, taught needlework, music, and above all, silence. The feet are bound, and so is the voice. Still, not every woman was bound. Among the Manchu ruling elite, the very people running the Qing dynasty, footbinding was forbidden. The irony? They still adored the look. Some Manchu women even wore tall platform shoes to mimic the swaying gait of bound-footed Han women. So yes, the unbound were sometimes trying to look like the bound, while others were breaking their bones for real. Fashion has never made total sense. And here's the kicker. Some husbands didn't even like footbinding. They just accepted it as the norm. The way someone might buy cologne they hate because it's what their dad wore. Some women bound their feet even after marriage, long after anyone was looking. Why? Because dignity was tied up in those bindings. To unbind would be to unravel not just cloth, but identity. You keep walking, or rather, gliding, through this world, and maybe your feet start to feel sore in sympathy. Maybe you curl your toes unconsciously, just imagining the pressure. Maybe you start to understand that footbinding wasn't just a physical practice. It was a lifelong contract between you and society. Signed not in ink, but in scar tissue. You're 6 years old. Your world smells of boiled rice, burnt incense, and warm fabric. You sit on a woven mat, legs crossed, and your grandmother, the one with eyes like tired lanterns, kneels in front of you. She's quiet, almost too quiet. There's a stack of white cotton strips beside her, and a pair of shoes that look like they belong to a doll. You reach out to touch them. Big mistake. She swats your hand gently, the way someone might shoo a bird from a forbidden fruit. Tonight's the night. Your mother stands in the corner, not speaking, not stopping it, because this is tradition. This is how you join the sisterhood. Not a joyful sorority, more like a velvet-wrapped trap. But still, everyone does it, or nearly everyone. And if you don't, well, you'll grow into a woman with wide, ugly feet and no husband. Probably worse than no husband, shame. So you nod. You want to be good. You want to be beautiful. You have no idea what that really means. The first step is warmth. Your feet are soaked in a basin of hot water laced with herbs, things meant to soften your skin and dull the pain. Camphor leaves, maybe, or a bit of pig's blood and alum, depending on the region. The air is heavy with steam and superstition. You start to feel sleepy. But then comes the pulling, the stretching. Your toes are yanked downward toward your soul, bent unnaturally and then folded under. One by one, the pinky toe goes first, because it's always the first to betray you. There's a sound. It's not a scream. Not really. It's more like a whimper swallowed in real time. Your grandmother doesn't look up. She's humming. Actually, something soft, almost a lullaby. You realize she did this too. Her mother. And hers. A quiet lineage of shared pain passed down like heirloom jewelry. Except this heirloom leaves your bones rearranged. Next comes the binding itself. The cloth is wrapped tightly around your feet, figure 8 patterns. Heel to arch, again and again until the foot folds in on itself like a squashed dumpling. Each layer tighter than the last. You're told not to cry. Crying is weakness. Crying is for girls who want to run. And running is for girls who don't get married. By the time the wrapping ends, your feet are 2 curved stumps barely able to bear your weight. You try to stand. You fail. You fall forward like a marionette with cut strings. That earns a rare laugh from your grandmother. Humor. Dark and dusty like a locked cabinet. This is just the first night. Tomorrow the bindings come off, briefly, to check for infection or bruises. Then they're wrapped tighter. The process repeats daily, for months, sometimes years. And yes, bones will break. They're meant to. That's how the arch forms. Pain is a sign of progress. If it doesn't hurt, you're doing it wrong. You think this is insane. Good. That means your modern instincts are still intact. But remember, in your Qing dynasty world, this isn't cruelty, it's choreography. A disciplined dance between flesh and fabric. Some families hire professional footbinders, midwives with calloused hands and a practical streak. They know how to fold the toes just so. How to detect early signs of infection. How to tighten without causing death. Yes, death. Because that happens. Gangrene creeps in. Bones rot. Sometimes toes fall off entirely. And that's considered a win because the foot gets even smaller. A blessing in disguise, some would say. As if dead toes were decorative tassels. But don't worry. Not every case is that tragic. Just most. There's an old fringe tale whispered in Sichuan villages that some girls who resisted footbinding would run away barefoot into the mountains and join bands of traveling performers. These wild-footed girls danced ferociously, earning coins and curses in equal measure. Historians still argue whether those rebellious women actually existed, or if they were just cautionary ghosts invented by nervous mothers. Back in your house, your feet are now bandaged and propped up on a low stool. Your job? Sit still. Don't move. Let the pain settle like tea leaves in a pot. You hear the neighbors next door, another girl crying softly. Another pair of bones reshaped. Another generation carved into the mold. The irony? No one questions it. In many circles, it's considered a rite of passage. A girl isn't truly raised until she's been bound. Like saying someone's not really a teenager until they've slammed a door. Except here, instead of slamming doors, you slam into reality. Beauty equals suffering. And control begins from the ankle down. Your father comes home from work, trading grain or writing accounts. He doesn't ask how your feet are. He doesn't look at them. But he does smile at your mother. As if to say, good, she's on her way. A maid brings you broth and sesame candy. The sweet dissolves on your tongue. But even that can't distract from the throbbing in your feet. Your toes pulse like tiny, furious hearts. You don't sleep that night. You just lie there, watching the lantern's shadow ripple on the paper screen, wondering if this will be worth it. If pain ever ends in applause. It's only the beginning. You're older now, 8, maybe 9. Your feet have shrunk to half their original length. Maybe less. You no longer remember what it's like to walk without limping. And stairs? They're your personal Everest. But everyone says you're becoming beautiful. Lotus-like. Your aunt whispers, eyes gleaming with something between pride and pity. And you believe her, because you have to. The phrase, golden lotus, follows you like perfume. It sounds lovely, right? But behind it is a brutal equation. 3-inch feet equals ideal beauty. This wasn't just random. In Qing, China, people genuinely believed that tiny feet made you more graceful, more desirable. Poets composed verses about the flower that blooms in a shoe, and artists painted erotic portraits of women half disrobed. Their bound feet the main event. Odd, yes, but to them, sensual, alluring, mysterious. Your feet, hidden in embroidered silk, are now the most powerful part of your body, and not in a way that makes any sense today. You sit in the garden, reading a poem aloud, well, pretending to. You're mostly listening to your older cousin gossip about another girl's clumsy feet. That girl's were 4 inches. Practically paddles. Apparently, her marriage proposal fell through. You shiver, not because you're cold, but because you realize how precarious your future is. 1 extra inch, 1 infected toe, 1 off-balanced step, and you're suddenly not good enough. In elite circles, a 3-inch foot was the gold standard. It was said to resemble a lotus bud, a delicate, closed blossom. Feet that measured 4 inches were silver lotuses, and 5 inches were considered barely passable. If not outright embarrassing, the math was cruel. And worse, it came with documentation. Families measured your feet and recorded the numbers like prized livestock. Still, you try to be proud. You've made it this far. And when your new shoes arrive, a crimson pair stitched with gold thread and phoenix feathers, you almost forget the pain. Almost. They're exquisite, completely useless for walking, of course. But that's kind of the point. The less you can move, the more refined you must be. There's a sort of logic in it. Twisted as it is, a woman who walks freely might run. A woman who runs might leave. And in a society where women were traded like land, that kind of freedom was dangerous. So you were trained not just to stay, but to stay beautifully. You watch your older sister get dressed for a family banquet. Her robes are heavy with embroidery. Her hair stiff with pins. And her feet slide into shoes smaller than your hand. You notice the way she walks, slightly hunched. Arms poised, steps short and rhythmic. She looks like she's floating. But you know better. It's not grace, it's calibration. Each step is a controlled wobble. Carefully practiced, like a flamingo on stilts. Only more painful. Erotic novels of the time often described the fragrance of the lotus step. Men were apparently obsessed with it. There were even guides for how to undress a woman starting from her feet, not because it was practical, but because it was ceremonial. Like unwrapping a rare, dangerous gift. You laugh under your breath, quietly, so no one hears, because deep down, you think, is this really what men wanted? Historians still argue whether the fetishization of lotus feet was widespread or mostly limited to the elite. Some say it was a top-down trend fueled by the court and upper classes, while others believe it seeped into village life naturally. Either way, the result was the same. Women bound their feet whether they were rich, poor, urban, or rural. Fashion doesn't discriminate, it devours. And like all things devoured, it leaves bones behind. You learn to dance. Not real dancing, but the kind of slow, swaying movement that suggests elegance without actual motion. A servant helps you stand, and you shuffle across the room with arms outstretched for balance. Everyone claps. You smile through clenched teeth. You'll be expected to do this for guests, for suitors, for your wedding one day. You might as well start practicing the performance now. You overhear your father boasting to a visitor. Her feet are barely bigger than a teacup. He says it like he's talking about a prize pig or a precious antique. You're proud and ashamed at the same time, but you're mostly numb. In the evenings, you sit with your grandmother. She doesn't bind your feet anymore. Your mother does that now, but she tells stories. Some are sweet, others, less so. One involves a neighbor girl who tried to unbind herself in secret. The bones in her feet grew back wrong, and she walked like a wounded goose for the rest of her life. No one married her. Don't be foolish, your grandmother mutters, as she gently peels off your bandages. You look down at your feet. They don't look like feet anymore. More like tiny, curled sculptures, pretty from a distance, horrifying up close. You flex your toes, or try to. They don't move, just ache. Remember, she says, almost whispering, a lotus must be pruned to bloom. You nod. Even though you're starting to wonder what's left to bloom, your shoes are now smaller than your palm. And your stride has become a glide, an elegant, wobbling drift that everyone says is lovely. Ladylike, proper. You no longer walk, you perform. Every movement is rehearsed, every moment a chance to be admired or judged. And believe me, people are watching. You wake each morning with a dull throb in your feet, like distant thunder in your bones. But that's normal now. Pain is part of your wardrobe. You sit by the window, stitching butterflies into a new pair of lotus shoes. Your fingers nimble and trained. These are your future wedding shoes. And they need to be perfect. They'll be red, auspicious, symbolic of happiness, and their soles will be stuffed with pine needles for fragrance and luck. But no one will ever see the insides. That's just for you. A private comfort in a public cage. Outside, the street bustles with life. Market stalls rattle with shouting vendors. Children chase chickens, and the occasional sedan chair bounces past, shaded by embroidered silk. You don't go out much. Few women do. You might visit a temple during the festivals or attend a gathering of other women. But mostly, you stay indoors, your world reduced to rooms, textiles, and teacups. They call it the inner quarters. You call it life. And in this life, lotus shoes are currency. Matchmakers visit, measuring not your smile, not your laughter, not your intelligence, but your feet. They ask how well you walk, whether you can pour tea gracefully while balancing on your distorted bones, whether your toes still bleed. If they do, that means you're still tightening the bindings. That means you're disciplined. That means you care. You smile and sip your tea through the pain. Your every motion silent proof that you're wife material. One day, your mother opens a wooden chest and pulls out her wedding shoes. They're a faded lilac, embroidered with silver cranes. She lets you hold them. They're even smaller than yours. I wore these when I first met your father, she says, almost wistfully. She doesn't mention how she couldn't walk properly for days after the ceremony. That part gets skipped. You start to notice how much of your world revolves around these shoes. There are entire marketplaces dedicated to them. Tiny boutiques, almost theatrical, lined with shelves of impossibly small slippers in brocade and velvet. You visit one, carried by sedan chair, and feel like a queen among cotton clouds. You choose a pair that's emerald green with tiny bells sewn into the hem. Every step will now ring softly, an announcement of your approach. A warning to chairs and ankles alike. But there's competition too. Foot envy is very real. At one tea gathering, a girl lifts her robe just slightly to show off her latest pair, hand-dyed in crushed woad. A rare, expensive pigment. The others gasp in admiration or jealousy. You pretend not to care. But that night you beg your mother for another set. Something even finer. It's not just about looks. Though, these shoes are like resume bullet points. Each pair tells a story. Of skill. Of sacrifice. Of social status. Some families have dozens, passed down through generations. Others save up for months to afford a single pair for a daughter's marriage. Fringe tales even tell of poor girls binding their feet and then walking barefoot just to make them bleed, to prove their worth to wealthier families. Historians still argue whether those cases were common or just urban legends whispered to scare lazy daughters into obedience. Back home, you watch your uncle's new bride attempt to serve wine during her wedding ceremony. She sways too much, loses her balance, and nearly drops the jade cup. There's an awkward silence, a few whispers, and a look of disappointment from her new mother-in-law. The bride's feet are clearly too big, maybe 4 inches. A silver lotus, but not quite gold. You wince for her. You feel a bit triumphant. 2. You would have nailed it. You start practicing your bridal walk. Back straight, head low, arms poised. It's not really walking, not like normal people do it. It's more like inching forward with grace and prayer. Your knees bent just enough to keep from falling. The pain makes you sweat behind your painted face. But when you get it right, your reflection in the mirror looks exactly like the paintings, serene, restrained, beautiful. Your younger cousin cries during her nightly rebinding. You don't comfort her, you just whisper, "It gets better," even though you're not sure it does. But what else can you say? This is the only road. Unbound feet might be easier, freer, but they lead nowhere. And here's the secret no one says aloud. You don't bind your feet just for a husband. You bind them to belong, to be accepted, to be admired, because in this world, having small feet isn't just about marriage, it's about identity. You're not a real woman without them. You're a walking symbol, or rather, a stumbling one. Every now and then, a visitor arrives from the provinces, someone with unbound feet, wide and sturdy. You watch them walk confidently through your village, and everyone stares. Some scoff, some laugh, but deep down, you wonder, is she free? Or just foolish? Because even now, after years of agony, you can't imagine unbinding. You've come too far. Your feet wouldn't grow back. They'd just be ruined, neither lotus nor leaf. A footless flower. And that's worse than anything. You're 15 now. And the wedding talks have begun. It's not romantic. No secret notes or stolen glances. This is negotiation, strategy. Your father meets with matchmakers over tea, discussing dowries, family lineage, and, of course, your feet. They speak of your 3-inch lotus, like it's a rare spice or a well-bred horse. You don't speak during these talks. You smile, bow politely, and pretend not to overhear your entire worth summarized in measurements and metaphors. You've become a master of the art of stillness. You know how to stand perfectly poised while the bones in your feet scream silently. You've learned to laugh softly while seated, always careful not to draw attention to the way your toes throb like angry fists. You've learned to hide your limp behind the hem of silk skirts and the clinking bells of embroidered slippers. It's performance, like everything else in this system. Today you're visited by a seamstress. She brings bolts of red and gold silk, measuring your arms, waist, and neck for your wedding robe. Such lovely small feet, she says as she adjusts the tape across your instep. You nod and smile, even though her touch makes your foot twitch involuntarily. It's still sensitive. It will always be sensitive. Nerve damage is part of the package. You already know your husband-to-be won't see your feet until after the wedding. Even then, it's not guaranteed. Lotus shoes stay on during most of married life. Footbinding created a mystique, an erotic tension, not unlike high heels today, but dialed up to 11 and dipped in actual trauma. In some love manuals of the Qing court, men were instructed never to unwrap their wives' feet completely, as the sight might ruin the illusion. Talk about romance. There's one surviving account from a traveling French Jesuit who claimed a nobleman fainted the first time he saw his wife's bare, bound feet. Historians still argue whether this anecdote was truth or just Western dramatics. But honestly, you wouldn't blame him. You're shown off now, occasionally, like a prized porcelain vase. At tea gatherings, older women ask to see your shoes, not your calligraphy. Your poetry goes unnoticed, but your tiny, arched foot? That earns gasps and approving nods. You overhear 2 women whispering that a cousin in Hangzhou had her feet unbound when she was 20. The result? Marriage cancelled. She became a nun, or maybe a maid, no one's sure, but she disappeared. That's how the story ends. Vanish or conform. And still, behind closed doors, mothers cry. You've seen it. Your own did. The night your cousin nearly lost her foot to infection. The stench of rotting flesh and vinegar-soaked cloths still haunts your nostrils. Her pinky toe turned black. Eventually, it just fell off. A servant buried it in the garden like it was some sacred object. That's how normalized it had become. And they still said she was lucky. In secret, your maid tells you her grandmother had unbound feet. She was from a northern nomadic tribe, proud, tall, and able to ride horses. You stare at her in awe. Did she run? You ask. Far, your maid whispers, but she always came home. There's a phrase your aunt likes to say. A well-bound foot carries 1,000 fortunes. You recite it to yourself when the pain flares. Like a prayer, or a curse. Your wedding draws closer, and with it comes the ceremonial preparation, the folding fans, the hairpins, the lacquered chest filled with silks. And the centerpiece? A brand new pair of bridal Lotus shoes. They're crimson, with gold thread stitched into phoenixes that chase each other along the sides. The soles are made of layered cotton, soft but firm, dyed with tea leaves and perfumed with rose petals. You run your fingers over them the night before the ceremony. Trembling. You're not nervous to marry. You're nervous to walk. You've practiced. For weeks. You've been rehearsing the wedding procession. 30 deliberate steps from the threshold to the ancestral altar. You're expected to pause halfway. Bow. Then continue. And all this while holding a tray of fruit balanced on your palms. If you drop anything, it's an omen. If you wobble too much, it's an embarrassment. And if you fall, you won't fall. The ceremony is a blur of incense and shouted blessings. Your veil weighs as much as your shame. But you make it, step by step, toward your new life. You don't drop the fruit. You don't fall. The applause is real. You feel it like a strange reward for a punishment endured in silence. That night, as you sit in the bridal chamber, your new husband enters. He bows awkwardly. You smile. He looks at your feet, still in those delicate crimson shoes. And you can tell he wants to say something. But instead, he just reaches for a teacup. Later, when he helps you undress, he pauses at your ankles. You freeze. He doesn't remove the shoes. He kisses the edge of the cloth, reverently, like a monk touching a relic. And you realize, it's not really you he loves. It's the myth you're married now. And the myth has followed you into your new home like a clingy cat with sharp claws. The household is larger, colder, filled with unfamiliar servants who whisper when they think you can't hear. You're not just a bride. You're an addition to your husband's family hierarchy, a new chess piece on an ancient board. The mother-in-law eyes you like she's inspecting fruit for bruises. You're pleasant, polite, obedient, but she still watches your feet every time you enter a room. Like they're the measure of your loyalty. Maybe they are. Your mornings begin with ritual, incense, grooming, dressing. The bindings come off only briefly. Then back on again, tighter than before. The pain has dulled into a kind of companionship now. Like a grumpy old friend who never leaves your side. Your Lotus shoes are still admired, of course. Guests ask to see them. Sometimes, a friend of your husband stares a little too long, pretending to compliment the embroidery while clearly imagining what lies underneath. You notice, but you say nothing. That's the rule. One evening, at a banquet, you're invited to perform a Lotus walk. You glide across the polished floor with arms curved just so, each step landing with a careful tap of your embroidered sole. It's the same rhythm you've practiced since girlhood. The room claps politely. Someone mutters something about you walking like a true Mandarin's daughter. But you notice the servant girls in the back row. One is barefoot. She watches you not with admiration, but with something else, maybe pity, or envy, or both. You sit down and sip tea. Your body still, your mind spinning, because now that you're inside this system fully, you're beginning to see it from the other side. It's not just about beauty. It's about control. The smaller your steps, the smaller your world. Your new sister-in-law once dreamed of becoming a healer. She memorized herb names, practiced acupuncture on pillows, but now she's married, and her life is bound to her husband's expectations. You ask her if she still reads medical scrolls. She laughs once. What for? My feet aren't going anywhere. And neither am I. She shows you her old shoes, navy blue with faded cranes. These were my rebellion, she says. I stitched one bird flying backward. You peer closer, and sure enough, there it is, a tiny, rebellious flight. You begin to notice other quiet acts of resistance. A servant who wears loose bindings, always wrapping quickly before inspection. A cousin who writes poetry mocking fashion, disguised as love songs. Even your mother-in-law, once thought so strict, keeps a pair of unbound shoes hidden in a chest. You discover them accidentally while retrieving winter wraps. They're huge compared to yours. Wide and practical. Shoes made for walking, not displaying. You say nothing, but something shifts. Your husband treats you kindly enough. He brings fruit, asks after your embroidery, never forces you to show your feet. You suppose that's something. Still, the intimacy always feels one-sided, like he's talking to a character you're playing. One night, he asks, "Do they still hurt?" You almost lie, but then, you nod. "I heard some villages are stopping the practice." He murmurs, not meeting your eyes. You blink. Stopping? It sounds like heresy, or freedom, or both. You learn that in certain rural areas, some women have chosen to stop binding entirely. Foot binding is fading, quietly, softly, like a scent carried off by wind. Western missionaries are part of it. Yes, but also Chinese reformers who question the cost of tradition. Some scholars call it a national shame. Others defend it as cultural identity. Historians still argue whether the anti-foot binding campaigns were more about modernization or morality, but the effect is real. There are even rumors of natural foot clubs. Women gathering to show off their real feet, wide, flexible, strong. You try to imagine it. A room full of women barefoot and proud. It feels impossible. You tell your sister-in-law. She stares at her tiny shoes and says, "Too late for us," but not without longing. That night, you take off your shoes and look at your feet in candlelight. They're like origami gone wrong, folded, puckered, scarred. You wiggle your toes, or try to. You can't remember what it was like to feel the earth under your full sole. Your husband sleeps. You stay awake, tracing the curve of your arch with a feather-soft cloth. You wonder what it would feel like to run. The next morning, a letter arrives from home. Your younger cousin has refused to bind. Outright. Her parents are furious, but she's unmoved. She says her shoes are for walking, not worship. Your mother writes. You laugh out loud. It's not a mocking laugh, it's relief. Someone, somewhere, is walking freely. And maybe, just maybe, one day, her footprints will be enough to lead you home. You're 23 now. And the world is shifting beneath your very tiny feet. Not literally. Of course, your balance still depends on your hips, your knees, your careful choreography of every step. But something else is moving. You feel it in the way people talk. The letters from distant cities. Even the soft unease in your husband's silences. One day, he brings home a pamphlet. Western paper, stiff and foreign. On the front is an image of a Chinese girl, not quite your age, smiling. Barefoot, surrounded by books. He places it on your writing desk and says, "This is what the reformers want." His voice is neutral, but his eyes search yours. You don't answer, because what you see in that photo is not wrong. Her feet are wide and strong. Yes, but so is her gaze. You imagine her walking fast, taking long confident strides down some faraway road. No one watching her hips sway. No one judging her marriageability by the width of her arch. You've heard rumors of girls attending schools now. Not just the rich ones. Either merchant daughters, peasant daughters, even former concubines who escaped to cities like Shanghai. Historians still argue whether education or economics had the greater influence on the decline of footbinding. But the outcome is undeniable. In the modernizing urban centers, small feet are becoming passé, like powdered wigs or leech therapy. You try to imagine unbinding your own. It isn't a new thought. Late at night, when your feet itch and burn, when the bones feel like chalk about to snap, you fantasize about it, the release. You'd soak them in warm water and unravel the cloth slowly. Like opening a secret, you'd stretch your toes, even if they're crooked forever. You'd stand, not on your heels, but on the full, flat strength of your foot. But then comes the terror. What if you can't walk? What if your husband leaves you? What if your mother-in-law bans you from the ancestral hall? What if you unbind and become invisible? Because in your world, bound feet mean status. They mean discipline. They mean tradition. And yes, they also mean pain, but pain you understand. Pain with a purpose. Without it, what are you? You decide to test the water. You loosen your bindings, just a little. During the day, you say your feet are swelling from summer heat. Your maid doesn't argue. She just gives you a knowing look. The same one she gave you when you first got your period. Equal parts sympathy and, good luck with that. The relief is immediate, like letting air into a sealed room. You manage to walk a bit more freely. Not far, just from the bedroom to the garden, but the difference is vast. You can feel the ground more. The pebbles underfoot. One even pokes through your thin sole. And you yelp. But still, you smile. That night, you slip out to the courtyard. No shoes. No bindings. Just your warped feet against the cool stone tiles. The moonlight spills like milk. And for a moment, you feel like the girl in the pamphlet. Then you hear footsteps. It's your sister-in-law. She sees you. Her eyes widen, not in horror, but something close to awe. You too? She whispers. And that's how you learn she's been doing the same. She unwraps her own feet by lantern light. And the two of you compare. It's like sharing scars after a battle, each curve and crease. Each missing toenail or fused digit. A story. You sit in silence for a long time, soaking your feet in the same bowl of chamomile water. Two prisoners, contemplating escape. The next week, a distant cousin arrives from Tianjin. She has natural feet, unbound. She walks like a queen across your veranda, heels thudding against the wood, completely unapologetic. Your mother-in-law winces, but your husband watches quietly. At dinner, the cousin talks about factories, railways, newspapers. She says women are organizing now, writing essays, holding salons, even starting businesses. The world is cracking open like a seed pod. And you feel both excited and afraid. Because what if it grows without you? After she leaves, your husband asks if you'd like to read her books. You say yes. And for the first time in your adult life, you sit with your feet unbound and your mind unleashed. You read about footbinding as a social contract, an unspoken agreement between women and society. Some historians argue that women were complicit in perpetuating it. Others claim it was survival. Plain and simple. You think it's both. You also read that during certain dynastic transitions, women in some provinces temporarily reversed the practice, letting their feet grow naturally until new rulers demanded the old customs return. It was always politics. In the end, wrapped around bone and skin like linen around a mummy. You close the book and stare at your feet. They're no longer just yours, they're history. And history, as you're beginning to learn, can be rewritten. You're 26. And you've done the unthinkable. Not all at once. It started as an experiment, loosening the wrappings further each week. Stretching your toes at night when no one watched. Walking barefoot just a few extra steps at dawn. Then one day, you simply didn't put the bindings back on. Your feet are not healed. They never will be. But they are yours. The bones didn't magically realign. Your arches are still warped. Your toes curled unnaturally under themselves. Like shy children hiding behind a curtain. But the blood flows freer now. You can walk a bit longer. You can stand for whole conversations without needing to sit. Your balance is still precarious. Stairs are your nemesis. But the wind feels different when it brushes your ankles. Like the world is gently applauding your rebellion. Your husband notices, of course. He says nothing at first. Just watches you move around the courtyard with that new stiffness. Not the delicate, doll-like sway of a bound woman. But the uneven, uncertain steps of someone learning a language they were never taught. One morning, he speaks. I like the way you used to walk. You freeze. But, he continues, I like this more. It's not love poetry, but it's as close as he gets. He's changing, too. Everyone is. The newspapers bring stories of women marching with bare feet in Shanghai, holding signs that read "Liberate the Soul." Okay, not literally, that would be a modern pun, but the message is clear. The anti-footbinding societies are gaining traction. Even the Empress Dowager, once a defender of the tradition, reportedly wavered in her final years. Historians still argue whether her change of heart was political theater or genuine remorse. But it marked a turning point. In your own town, whispers grow louder. A wealthy merchant's daughter refuses to bind. The baker's wife burns her old silk shoes in a temple courtyard. One girl fakes a foot injury to delay her binding until she's too old. Another simply runs away. Even your mother writes cautiously. Things are different now, she says. I suppose some girls will never bind again. The tone is unsure, like she's watching the future from a window but not yet ready to step outside. And your mother-in-law? At first, she glares, then sighs. Then one day, she asks if you still have that chamomile soap recipe. You nod, and hand it to her. Your home shifts. It's subtle. Meals become longer. Laughter easier. You and your sister-in-law walk the garden together. Shoes off. Robes pulled slightly higher to avoid the dirt. You no longer feel like a showpiece in a lacquered box. You feel human. But not everyone is thrilled. An elder aunt arrives one evening for a funeral ceremony. She sees your bare feet and gasps audibly. "You've undone your honor," she hisses, loud enough for servants to hear. You nod. "Yes," you say, "and found it underneath." She doesn't speak to you for the rest of the visit. Your husband's business takes him to Suzhou more frequently now. When he returns, he brings stories: girls in university, men marrying natural foot wives without scandal. He even brings back a new pair of shoes, not Lotus shoes, but wide, comfortable, almost ugly shoes. You laugh, hold them up like trophies, and then promptly throw them at your husband's head. He ducks, laughing too, but you wear them. In private at first, then outside. You feel exposed, raw, like a painting that's had its varnish stripped. People stare, some frown, some smile. One old woman touches your arm and whispers, "My daughter wants to unbind." "Thank you." And just like that, you realize something important. You're not the only one rewriting this story. Footbinding isn't gone, not yet, but it's wobbling, cracking, like the clay teacup you dropped as a girl, the one that shattered into perfect, unfixable halves. Some still hold onto the pieces. Others are quietly sweeping them away. Your sister-in-law hosts a gathering one afternoon. 6 women sit in a circle, embroidery hoops on their laps, unbound feet tucked beneath them like secret roots. No one mentions them, but no one hides them either. It's revolutionary in the quietest way possible. You talk about everything: herbs, food, poems. One woman recites a new line she's written: "Let the foot tell the truth the shoe once hid." It's awkward. It's perfect. You all clap. Later, as the sun sets, your feet ache, not from bindings, but from use. It's a better pain. You soak them in the same bowl as always. Your sister-in-law humming beside you. The water is cloudy, scented with mint this time. You close your eyes and feel, not just the sting of tired muscles, but the memory of the girl you once were. The one who screamed into a pillow as her toes broke. The one who walked 30 perfect steps with a tray balanced on her palms. The one who dreamt of running, even when she couldn't stand. She's still there, but she's not alone anymore. You're 28 now. And there are entire days you forget your feet were ever bound. Well, not forget. Exactly. The pain still flares up in cold weather. And there's a certain angle of walking that will forever be lost to you. But the bindings are gone. The silk shoes stored away in a wooden box beneath your bed. And more importantly, so is the need to pretend. You walk, you limp, you stretch, you laugh when the heel of your shoe catches on a stone. Once, you even dance, clumsily, offbeat, in your sister-in-law's courtyard after 2 cups of rice wine. Everyone claps, and no one mentions your feet. Freedom looks like that sometimes, lopsided joy. One morning, a visitor arrives from the capital, a reform-minded teacher traveling south to encourage new womanhood. Whatever that means, she stays in your home. And over breakfast, she says something that startles you. Footbinding never made you more beautiful. It just made you quieter. You blink. It's not an insult. Not really. Just a diagnosis. And you think, yes, that's exactly what it did. It made your steps smaller, your voice softer, your world narrower. It turned pain into a virtue. It gave everyone else something to admire while you learned to hide your suffering behind painted fans and carefully measured smiles. But now, you're louder. Not shouty, not scandalous, just louder. You ask more questions. You offer more opinions. When your husband's friends bring their wives over, you don't just pour tea and nod, you talk. Sometimes, they even listen. Of course, not everyone is thrilled about this. One older merchant, over-steamed fish, chuckles and says, "Women are forgetting their place these days." You smile sweetly. Maybe we're just remembering it's not under your shoe. There's a pause. Then your husband laughs, hard, and suddenly, everyone else does too. You realize it might be a joke, but it's also a test. And you passed. You keep the box of Lotus shoes. Though, you're not ready to throw them away. Not because you want to wear them again, heaven forbid, but because they are evidence. A record of who you were, of what was done, of what you survived. Sometimes you open the box and just stare at them. They're tiny, ridiculously so. They look like they belong to a child, not a grown woman. The embroidery is still vibrant, cranes, peonies, lucky clouds, but the soles are worn, almost threadbare. You touch them gently, then close the lid. You don't need to wear your past to carry it. You start teaching girls in the neighborhood how to read. Not formally, just ink brushes. Bamboo slips. The basics of characters and grammar. They sit around you wide-eyed. Their feet unbound and dirty from climbing walls and playing in alleys. Their parents tolerate it, mostly because their husbands think it's quaint. But one mother brings you sweets and whispers, "I wish I had this when I was her age." There are days you still catch judgmental looks. From the temple priestess, from your great aunt, from the neighbor who insists her daughter must be bound by age 10, or no good family will take her. You no longer flinch, because more and more, people are changing, quietly, but certainly. You hear of a wedding, 2 towns over, where the bride walked barefoot down the aisle. Her toes painted red in defiance. Her father wept, her mother fainted, the groom clapped. Another story drifts in from Beijing, a school founded entirely by unbound women. They call it the Wide Step Academy. Okay, again, probably not the literal name, but it might as well be. They teach everything from medicine to calligraphy. One graduate became a midwife, another a translator for foreign diplomats. Their names make it into newspapers. You cut one out and tuck it behind the mirror. Just in case, you say, and wink at your reflection. You and your sister-in-law go to market together now, on foot. Without escort, you carry your own baskets. It's not an act of rebellion anymore. It's normal, almost. You buy fabrics with patterns of cranes in flight. You sew new shoes. They're wider, softer, and infinitely more comfortable. Your embroidery is still exquisite. But now you stitch more than just birds and flowers. You stitch stories. A girl running across a field. A pair of hands removing a silk binding. A single foot, standing proud. One afternoon, you find a young girl outside the temple, crying. Her parents are pressuring her to bind. She doesn't want to. She heard about you. You bring her home, give her tea, tell her the truth, not the poetic, sanitized version, but the full truth, the pain, the blood, the nights you screamed into a blanket, the years of pretending. She listens. Then she says, "I don't want to walk pretty. I want to walk fast." You grin. Good. The world's moving quickly. You'll need to keep up. Later that night, your husband reads aloud from a reformist essay. Some man arguing that a nation that hobbles its women hobbles itself. He finishes, looks at you, and says, "He stole your line." You shrug. "He can borrow it. I've got more." You light a candle. Unwrap your feet, not from cloth, but from the long silence you once mistook for grace. Outside, the wind shifts. 1,000 tiny footsteps echo from far-off cities. Some hesitant, some determined, all headed in the same direction. You smile. And then you walk your 30 now. Not quite old, but old enough to have lived through a quiet revolution. The town looks mostly the same. Lanterns still sway above the market. Incense curls lazily from temple rooftops, but there's something different in the air. It's in the way the children run without shame, their bare feet slapping the dusty ground. It's in the laughter of women who no longer walk with their eyes downcast, watching their every step like they're balancing glass. You don't always think about footbinding anymore. Sometimes a whole week passes without the old ache. Other times, a change in weather makes your bones hum like a distant gong. But even then, you don't curse your body the way you once did. You honor it. You've come to see your feet not as broken relics, but as symbols of something tougher than tradition, survival. The anti-footbinding movement has grown bolder. Public renunciation ceremonies are held in city squares, where women burn their bindings like old contracts. New pamphlets arrive monthly, illustrated with smiling girls and proud mothers. One features a drawing of a woman stepping on the word, shame. It's a little dramatic, sure, but you still pin it to your wall. Historians still argue whether these public displays were truly grassroots or encouraged by reformist governments wanting to align with Western powers. Either way, it doesn't matter to you now. You know what it feels like to step into your own freedom, and you know how heavy the cost was. You're no longer alone in your choice. Of the 10 women you shared tea with last spring, 8 have unbound. The other 2 aren't ready, but they've started soaking their feet at night. That's how it begins, not with a speech, with a basin of warm water and the decision to just loosen the cloth. Just a little. Your niece, just 7 years old, stomps proudly through the house in her wide new shoes. "I'm never binding," she declares. Fists on her hips like a tiny general. You laugh, pull her into your lap, and say, "Good, Then maybe you'll be able to outrun me." She cackles, points to your feet, and says, "You can barely outrun a turtle." She's not wrong, but you have speed in other ways. You've started writing short poems. Mostly. One gets published in a local gazette. Another, a longer essay, circulates among a group of literate women from the next province. A stranger writes you a letter in return. "Your words made me take off my shoes." She says, "I didn't know I was allowed." That one makes you cry. You still keep your Lotus shoes. Not in a hidden box anymore, but on a shelf. Visitors ask about them sometimes. You tell them the truth. The whole truth. You don't flinch. You explain what they meant, and what they cost. Some shake their heads. Some tear up. One girl looks at them and says softly, "They're beautiful. And awful." You nod. Exactly. The world doesn't change in fireworks. It changes in whispers. In private choices. In daily acts of resistance so small they almost go unnoticed, until they accumulate into something vast and irreversible. Like your steps. One, then another, then another. You teach more now. Reading, writing, embroidery, even history, at least the kind you're allowed to share. You don't need to lecture about footbinding. Your feet do it for you. There are still women out there, bound and hurting, too afraid or too old to undo what's been done. You hold space for them, too, because shame is the slowest thing to unbind. And some scars run so deep. They outlive the pain. But more and more, little girls are growing up without knowing the shape of a lotus shoe. And that's the quiet miracle. One night, you walk outside in the dark. No moon, no lanterns, just the stars and your unsteady footsteps. You don't trip, you don't wince, you just walk, each step imperfect, but yours alone. Your sister-in-law joins you. Then your niece. You walk a crooked circle in the courtyard, laughing like fools. Your feet are misshapen, your path is wobbly, but you are free. And then, just as the night cools and the crickets begin their lullaby, you sit on the stone bench and take a long, full breath. The story is not over. But this part, this chapter, it's closed. The night grows deeper now, and everything slows. You sit on the cool bench, feeling the warmth of the day lingering on the stone beneath you. The wind is soft, like fingers brushing the edge of a silk sleeve. Somewhere in the distance, a paper lantern sways, creaking slightly as it dances to the rhythm of sleep. Your feet, worn and wide, rest gently on the earth. No pressure, no pain, just the quiet hum of muscles that have earned their rest. You close your eyes and hear the whispers of every girl who ever dreamed of running, dreams you now carry like folded letters tucked deep inside your sleeve. The story of footbinding is not one of villains and heroes. It's a story of expectations, endurance, and quiet defiance. It's the sound of silk tearing, the sting of vinegar on broken skin, the soft gasp of a girl who finally walks without fear. It's not clean, it's not pretty, but it's real. And tonight, you've walked it. So now, rest your head, let your breath grow slow and heavy. You've traveled centuries in this story, felt the ache of tight shoes, the thrill of rebellion, the power of release. You've survived what many could not. And more than that, you've remembered, which is its own kind of victory. Close your eyes now, gentle traveler. You're safe, you're free. And tomorrow, when you wake, maybe take a moment to stretch your toes. Just because you can. Wish you health and happiness.